Instagram DM'd you about this, but I want to talk to you, somebody who has won literally more than anybody. You're the most decorated Winter Olympian of all time. Crazy to say. I am so excited to be talking to you. Can't believe it. Really, it's like I'm fucking thrilled. But so you're this person who's won more than anybody, and I wanted to talk to you about losing because I think, and I want you to tell me if you agree or disagree, but I think that the thing that separates winners from losers in the long term is how you lose. Meaning, like, I'm a person who really, really struggles with failure. It can really just take me out. I battle my mind and wanting to give up. And it's a time suck. It does things to me mentally that I'm not proud of. It really takes me down. And I'm assuming that you are not that way, that there's something different in how you lose that gets you to be somebody who wins consistently. Like, it's always easy if you win consistent. I've never struggled with winning. You know, when I win, I just keep winning. In the past, when I acted, it's like, oh, I book a job, I'm going to book 3. But then if I wouldn't book one, it would be 6 months before I'd book another one. It was just crazy what it would do to me mentally. And nowadays with writing or directing, it's like if I get rejection from a film festival, oh, I'm going to quit. Oh, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, then I wallow and I watch 5 seasons of Girls in 3 days. And then I'm like, well, there's nothing else I want to do with my life. I know I'm going to do this. So I get back on the horse. But it's like, it does things to me that I don't like. So how do you lose? What happens to you when you lose?
On a personal level, when I would lose, it was pretty traumatic, I think, psychologically speaking. So, we prepare a lifetime for these races that last, 40 seconds long, a minute and a half long. And then when we don't get the result that we've been training for years to achieve, it does something on a personal level for me that I took it extremely personally. So it could have been losing in practice. It could be losing during training. It could be losing in the warm-up. It could be a feeling that I was seeking or trying to get, and I wasn't able to replicate that or simulate the same type of expectation that I had going into that race or into that warm-up or into that final result. And so, I think across the board, there was a lot of times where I was significantly always kind of questioning, am I good enough? Is this good enough? Did I do enough? Did I prepare enough? And so it operated, when I say it, I mean kind of, my mind operated from a place almost out of fear. And a fear of failure and a fear, I think, of losing. That's one, side of this. I think on the other side, when we talk about, the psychological game that happens during sports, specifically talking about short track speed skating, we've got many different races. So whether it's a 500 meter race, whether it is a 1,000 meter race, whether it is a relay, every race is slightly different. And so I would have to correlate how I feel as an athlete, what's driving me as an athlete, and then the expectation of that race, and then the result. So after I get the result, whether I did or did not win, I sometimes, like you, would go in these holes where I would play that race thousands of times over in my head to the point where it was, I would say it's probably toxic, and I couldn't get it out of my head. The more and more that I trained my mind and I went through this process of understanding where my strengths were, where I would stop going down these downward spirals and instead being able to respond versus react. I think that was really important for me to help recognize was my natural human reaction for whatever reason, whether it's microtrauma, whether it's upbringing, whatever happened in my life to make me the person I am. My first initial reaction would not give me the direction that I wanted. So I would have to then take a step back and almost disengage and then recalibrate my mind and say, okay, that's natural for me to feel emotionally this way. It's natural for me to be upset about not getting the result that I wanted. However, how can I articulate the best path forward now, right? So it's difficult because once you involve emotion, in the positive side, it'll drive you and it'll pull you and you're on fire. And the other side is if that emotion is not, I guess, managed properly, especially if it's negative, it can be highly destructive and self-sabotaging.
Yes. You've explained, that's my personality. So thank you for articulating that. You mentioned something in The Weight of Gold. I love that documentary. It's on HBO. Everybody should check it out. That you thought some athletes are more motivated by wanting to win and wanting to be the best, and you felt that you were more motivated by a fear of failure. What exactly is the difference? What does that mean?
So on one side, I mean, look, I've experienced all of them. And so I think I can't speak for some other athletes, but I've seen, from the place that they're operating from. So some athletes, and I too had days where I wanted to win. I wanted to crush it. And I was, super alpha. I wanted to be the big dog on the ice. I wanted to be the champion. And I operated very well from that space. And then there was times where I operated from a place, like I said, out of a pure fear for failure. Like I did not want to deal with the consequences psychologically. That pain was so severe and so visceral to me that I wouldn't be able to sleep, right? So I knew, it's not like going into like a nightmare, but it's more of, I want to prepare so well and so deeply that I have no options on the table regardless of the outcome. And that was a huge driving factor for me. So that's why I trained completely psychotically and intensely and obsessively day in and day out, because I just did not want to leave a fraction of a percentage of doubt to say, if I could have done this or should have done that, or I should have had more rest or trained a little bit harder. I didn't want to have any of those elements seep into my mind frame, because those to me were weaknesses. And it's so easy to say, oh, if I would have done this, I should have done that, I could have done that. I didn't want to have that. I wanted to be able to finish ultimately a race or an Olympics or a competition and be able to say, you know what, like regardless of outcome, I feel really happy about my preparation and how much effort and time and energy and sacrifice that I put into that. That to me is a personal win that was very hard to achieve. And as we go through life, I think, people think that athletes of all types are just these like hyper aggressive, very alpha types that just want to win. But I would argue and say that's actually true, but it's not entirely 100% accurate. There's some pieces there that they just don't talk about.
So it's sort of the no regrets. That's your book title. Your first book title, right?
Yeah, Zero Regrets.
That's kind of okay. Zero regrets. Okay, that's like your mentality. I understand that, but what is the difference between some people fail and they never get back up? It cripples them. A friend of mine comes to mind. She was in a relationship from 12 to 14, and then just 13 years later still hasn't been in another one because that failure got to her so deeply, that emotional trauma, that scarring was so deep that it didn't motivate her. It seemed to just guide her to not do it at all. So what's the difference between the person who failure knocks them out so hard that they say, I'm done, I can't, I give up, and the person who says, wow, I hated how that felt, and I'm going to make sure that I prepare and never face that feeling again, or at least do everything I can in my power to not face it?
Yeah, it's a great point. So I think I would say, based on the research that we've done on my team, the amount of people and the ratio of people who operate from a place where they can actually succeed in the workplace, whatever it is, or in life, operating from a fear of failure is still actually smaller than those who need to taste that sense of confidence and have that kind of driving force to say, you know what, I'm going to be okay. Things are going to be okay. It's going to work itself out. I will find a way. I will have some sort of purpose. And for those who have been crushed or been crippled or been paralyzed by the mindset of, I don't want to go down that path because I can't touch that pain again, it's dangerous because that pain always is there. And something that I always suggest and recommend to my close friends is, you're going to have to come to terms with facing the fire. And so if there's ever fire, are you just going to retreat and run the other way every time? Which you can live, we live in a society where you can absolutely shield yourself and isolate yourself from being in those situations or conditions. However, you're not actually growing. And the only way for you to grow is two things. One, you have to take the chance again, right? So in particular with your friend, and your expectation has to be altered from, this is what I'm going into this with my intentionality, meaning like I'm not going into this thinking I'm going to get hurt again. I'm going into this with an open mind to be able to say, what can I do to still have this experience benefit me and the progress in my life, but also do it in a way that, hey, there is a chance that this may not go my way. And that's okay. You cannot control every single micro minutia of your life. It's impossible. I was one who every millimeter of my life I wanted to control. And there was some things that are simply out of your control. So if you can create a sense of power from that versus being handcuffed to it, you change the paradigm of the way that your mind responds and reacts to these problems, insecurities, self-doubts, and turns them into, I'm willing to go on this adventure again. And that's the way I think that you see the happiest people on this planet. They look at life as an experience that is happening for them instead of happening to them. And, I, like anyone else, have played this game in sports that is essentially a game of poker, right? Who can show no weaknesses or any insecurities or self-doubts or fears? Who can show that they are indestructible and nothing will crush them? Who here is the person who never needs to ask or reach out for help, et cetera, et cetera. Now, those are great tenets and strengths to have as a warrior going through sport. But the reality is we're all still human. And so the place that we all fail to recognize, and that number one greatest tool, which is our ally or our foe, is our mind. And if it's not wielded and used properly, it can be incredibly destructive. And I just urge people to look within, right? And if you can't feel it, if you can't touch that space in your heart to know that you have purpose, you have meaning, you have an ability to adapt and thrive, you're going to have to reach out to friends and family, to books, to read about history, about the human condition, about how far we've come, not only as a society, but as humans on this planet, to see just how powerful we can be. And when you recognize that and you feel that and you have that sense of gratitude for another chance, I believe it changes your perspective on the world as a whole.
So interesting. Was this your sort of growth mindset, or the way that your mind seems to be oriented? Do you think this was something you were born with? Was this a more nature or nurture thing? Was it your dad, your coaches?
I think it was probably a blend of all of the above. So I had a tremendous father experience. My dad he was my best friend. He was my teammate. I was raised in a single parent household. Everything that he did, my father had greater plans than I could possibly, perceive what was happening at the time. So everything that he was pushing me towards, he was trying to teach me, give me some sort of guidance and lesson about life, about my own personal habits that I was creating, how I could change those habits over time, my own natural human behaviors, and then talking about those human behaviors. Why do you do this? Why do you are drawn to this? Why do you do this in races? And he was a big proponent of, you don't have to be in a fixed state. So this was kind of before, I think we all have the term of growth mindset. This was
ahead of the curve.
8, 9, 10 years old. It's a long time ago, Jennette. But my father was just philosophically, I think him coming from Japan as a Japanese immigrant, coming here, not speaking a language, not knowing anyone, having to survive with no money in an era where, a Japanese man was not exactly welcome in this country, and having to figure it out and not listening to people who said it couldn't be done, and only keeping his eyes looking forward on the target, on the ball, to always keep pushing. And in reality, just keep showing up, keep getting up every single day, regardless of what has happened. And those stories, I think, resonated within me at a young age to be able to recognize that. And by the way, my father would tell me all the time, anything that you want to do, you can do it. You have to fully commit and put your mind to it. Mm-hmm. And so while I don't fully believe that, like I'm not going to go play basketball, right? I'm not going to go be a swimmer, although I was a good swimmer when I was a kid. But I think that if you tell your son or daughter that enough, eventually that conditioning is going to seep into that brain. And so at a very early age, when I was training in sport, I was introduced into sports psychology, into meditation and mindfulness, into the power of this interest of the Eastern philosophical view on controlling mechanisms within your mind, which will yield incredible physical performances. And I went down that rabbit hole, and I just always believed that even though genetically I was not actually designed for the sport of short track speed skating in the way that probably the top 10 were, I just believed that I could overcome any of those potential challenges, and we could tap into this reservoir of talent and strength and potential to unleash. And I felt that no one else was willing to go down that avenue and really explore how powerful the mind is when it is really kind of connected. So that came from my father. And on the coaching side, they were always pushing me, obviously on a physical side. But I think to me, sports is as mental as it is physical. And I think that life is like that, right? So you just have to be connected.
Well, yeah, it's like you mentioned in, maybe it's that documentary, maybe it's something else. I was like watching some interviews yesterday, but you were mentioning how you enjoy the mental game, or maybe you said that the mental game is your favorite part of the sport, and that you study like the behavior of your competitors, or that that you would study them and what they listen to, so you would know when they were having a good or bad day. Is that like that sounds pretty unique to you, or do you think that's something that everybody's doing, or is this like a you thing because of your particular interests and fascinations?
I don't know. I can tell you that I was so much in the bubble of studying so often. They probably were studying me just as intensely, but I just felt that for me to so in the game of short track speed skating, just to give you some context, Jennette.
Yeah.
Nobody ever shows that they're tired. No one ever shows that they are going 100% full out speed. They're always like one arm on the back, two arms in the back, right? You kind of like, it's all, everyone's kind of having this false armor on kind of at all times. Even when you finish a final, no one wants to show that each other that you're breathing heavy, that the race was really hard. So there's this game that goes on. And so we have to forcefully find out and decipher those small messages and human behavior that we see as patterns that would lead me to believe that, hey, I'm in a preliminary round with this Canadian. I've been watching this person for 10 years. I know when he or she is having a good day or a bad day or is faking it, is basically bluffing. So I got really good at identifying when people were having a great competition and when they felt good and they had a natural, true, organic, authentic confidence versus those who were kind of playing the game and essentially saying, oh yeah, I feel amazing. I feel so strong. I could feel that. And I could feel that they didn't really believe it, that they were trying to. And that's what they should have been doing, is telling themselves this self-talk this promotion internally, right? But I that's where I became obsessed with it. And then because I felt the game was so mental, I would actively show them, almost overpowering in a way, either through the practice days leading up to the competition, that we would just, rip out these incredibly fast lap times, and they would be there watching on the sidelines, watching our practice. I would show them that this was completely like cakewalk, that I had this reservoir of strength and power that I hadn't even tapped into yet. When in reality, Jennette, I was going like 105%. I was going like all out and I had nothing else to give. But I was able to show that. I was able to fake that face and fake that emotion so that they started to think in their head, oh shit, this guy just went that fast and he looked like he wasn't even trying. Right? And when they feel that, when they really, really feel that that was an authentic display of performance, they start to question if they themselves have been training hard enough, if they themselves are ready for this competition. And I tell you, subconsciously, it would change the strategy of their racing. So for me, my job was to, how can I make my actual final race easier? And if I could beat them before we ever step to the start line, then I've got it won.
I feel like that's such a rare thing. Like, I don't know. I never thought of athletes as competing. Like, obviously, that there's the mental component and psyching each other out and what have you, but that it so goes down to the mental side of things. That's just wild. I also feel like it's very different from like with creative, with like entertainment stuff, right? I feel like there's a different overall mindset. Like, I've always respected the athlete mindset most because it is one of discipline and order and structure. And that just seems admirable to me versus the creative, which, what do we associate with like the artist who's just like, oh, I don't know why I did a British accent there, but they're waking up late and they're like painting a thing, and then they'll just maybe not paint for 3 months, and then they'll get lost in a romance and then revisit their novel. And it's just like, where's the structure? Why why is entertainment so associated with just kind of being more of a laissez-faire, like let's just figure it out as we go?
So in the creative space, it is different. You're absolutely correct. And I think that anyone who's ever sat down to write, I have, and you've set this hardcore schedule to write no matter what you're emotionally feeling or how your mind is working that day, it is simply not productive. You can set a schedule to do 8 hours a day writing for the next 8 weeks, and you may only have 3 days that were actually productive. The rest is just forced writing. And forced writing goes out the window, as you know. Like, it's got to be a natural flow to where you've been writing for like an hour and a half and you're like, whoa, what just happened with the time?
Yes,
That's what you're seeking. You're seeking the flow state. So I always say, so in the world of sports, obviously every minute counts, okay? In the creative space, every minute counts, but the idea or the creation or the moment or getting into that flow state is the most important aspect, as it is in sport. And so while you may not have some semblance of a schedule, what I can say is, how do you recreate an environment that allows you to be the best version of yourself? And what I mean by that is, whether it's the food that you're eating, whether it's the sleep that you're getting, whether it is the movement in your body, whether it is the people that you are around, whether it is the environment that you're spending time on the weekends or the weekdays, whatever that is, I wouldn't say it's a routine, but making sure that you're getting your daily or weekly or monthly dose of whatever it is that makes you feel good. And when you feel good, that emotion starts to drive motion. And that motion is to getting into this area and arena of being in the flow state. And so as an actress or as a writer or as a director, when you're in that zone, when you feel like Neo from the Matrix, and it's almost easy. Right. It's automatic and it's beautiful. Just like in sports, we seek that for a 40-second race, but we prepare for that race over the course of 12 years. So just like if you are about to, say action, or you're sitting down and write something, you want to be able to replicate that and duplicate it. And I always have said for the longest time, you can't force it. It's got to be a trained skill. And then ultimately, we'd like to do it like a light switch, right? Boom, we turn it on. Boom, we turn it off. I'm going to go hang with my friends.
That's
boom,
my dream.
Turn it on.
Yeah.
Like that's the dream for an athlete, right? And so when I tell you that I had probably 4 races in my entire career that I could say that was a perfect race, from basically I was like 12 years old until when I retired when I was like 28 years old.
4 in your entire career?
4 in my entire career, 4 races. Now, training, I would have several, but
sure,
I could get into the zone running, biking, lifting weights, in the sauna. But actually the races themselves, when it came down to the performances and the thousands of variables that can change on that given day, I only had 4. So those to me are highly addictive elements. They are things that we are actually shown to be performing at our highest self, which is what we all desire to be. And there's nothing greater. There's nothing greater than being in that flow. And it just feels like everything is right. And so, if you asked a short track speed skating athlete, if you had asked me, tell me how you feel, I would say, I feel really good today. It's like, but what does that really mean, right? Like, how do you decipher, I feel good today? My blades feel good. My skates feel good. What? Like, your skates are the same. They're a fixed object. Like, they're a thing. They're a physical object that doesn't change. They should never change. What do you mean they feel good? So I just believe that there's so many thousands of kind of micro variables that we're not aware of that we do on the subconscious and the conscious level. To me, mood has a lot to do with it. Drive and energy and consistency had a lot to do with it, with setting those goals in the world of sport. And now that I'm no longer competing, I know that I still am very routine in certain areas, but I'm also very flexible to know that I get some of my greatest inspiration when I say yes to things that throw me out of the routine. And I do things that are out of that element because
kind
I
of
think
uncomfortable.
We have to get uncomfortable. We also need to be around new environments. If you do the same thing every single day, you're kind of not really growing. You're just you're creating a controlled environment. So I think it's good in some areas, right? Because I know I need X amount of hours of good sleep. I know I need to work out. I know I need this type of food for me personally as Apollo to perform his best in whatever I'm doing. But yesterday I went on a hike kind of randomly. And during that hike, I had like 1,000 ideas of talking to people who I'd never met before because there was 4 really cool people there with great personalities. So that's what I mean. Like life is an adventure. And when you treat it as such, with obviously some reins, because there's times when you got to rein it back in. You can't just be going on hikes for the rest of your life.
Sure.
Be amazing. But, I think you get what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, no, totally. This is kind of applicable. There was a script that I was writing that I loved. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be my first feature. I know 100% this. I'm like driven, fucking love this thing. I finished it. I finished a second draft and a third draft. And I did 8 or so drafts on it. And then I got to the point where I couldn't draft it anymore because I didn't know how to solve the problems that were left. I got so discouraged that I put that thing away. And if somebody would bring it up, so I had sent it to a few people. If somebody say, hey, are you going to make that thing? Whatever happened with that thing? I'd become very prickly about it. Like, no, kind of just, I don't want to talk about that. Just really, I guess, hurt, kind of a little bit, mini traumatized by just, oh no, that was a thing that I couldn't do. So I put it away and I'm never going to see it again. It's never going to see the light of day. Then cut to 2 years later, a couple weeks ago, I signed with this new manager who I should have signed with a long time ago. He's the best. But he was like, hey, can I read that thing? I think, he's going to try to figure out something to do with it. And suddenly I felt motivated again. I was like, yeah, let me go. I'm going to go into it and draft this. I need to make it better. And I felt the thing that I wish I had felt 2 years ago, which, that could just be an age thing. That could just be a life experience thing. Who's to say? But I think that the reason why I was able to go back into it was because I had the support of somebody, the enthusiasm and the belief that it could be a thing. My goal would be to have that be a self-directed thing, to not have to have an external, oh, guess what? You're going to get your movie made, so go draft it. I want to know, how does one make that, how does one get like be self-directed to have that belief when maybe they're not getting that outside validation? They're maybe not getting that reinforcement.
That's a great question. And I think that outside reinforcement is our way to give us the guardrails, is if we're headed towards the right path, right? So if you're looking at this from a perspective of, I can see light at the end of the tunnel, but I've got this vast open plain, people and their opinions and their responses give us those guardrails that we can kind of ping pong back and forth all the way until we reach that end target and goal. Challenge is when you don't have those guardrails, when you don't have those things anymore, you can still see light at the end of the tunnel, but you're unsure of what it actually looks like. And you're also unsure of what it feels like. So some things that I've kind of recognized is, and this is really hard because I'm not a proponent of never give up, just keep going and keep doing the same things every day, because that's obviously the definition of insanity if things aren't changing, right? So you have to be able to have what I call these gut checks and be able to essentially say, what is my checklist? Like, what was the purpose of me doing this in the beginning? Number one, I think that always will change, right? So we lose sight of that as we go on. So a year into writing a book, we forget the reasons why we actually wanted to write this book in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah, you lose the passion.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, and that will maybe change, right? You talk to your agent, talk to your manager, everyone's got their own opinion, their own experience, and that'll change the way that you write or you're thinking about things.
Sure.
And so it's good to kind of what I call getting up onto the balcony. And so it does take you disengaging from that moment of fight of whatever it is that you're feeling, and metaphorically climbing up onto the balcony to survey the landscape of where was I spending my energy and time? How is this important in my life and in my journey and in my career path right now? And what and where do I need to do to concentrate on those items? What do I need to do today that'll help me find that additional insight, confidence, sliver of excitement again to get me up and going? I had the same thing with my book, by the way.
Did you?
So I began writing this book in like late 2018.
This is your second book?
It's my third book.
Third book. Oh my God.
Yeah. So this book talks about like the transition from Olympic athlete to civilian life, right? And this it's like massive loss of identity associated.
Yes.
So
yeah.
In this process, for the past 6 months, I haven't written anything in this book. Literally, I've written absolutely not even one word. It's been sitting there in my Scrivener book. It's just been chilling. And I went in there the other day and I'm reading this. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, wow, like, who wrote this? This doesn't even sound like me. This is a year and a half, 2 years ago, so to speak. So I had to re-identify again, why is this important? What is the purpose and the mission of this thing? And is this in the right realm? And so I've sent it to many friends. Half my friends love it. The other half give their own opinions on how I should change it. And so it's hard, right? So how do you navigate the internal compass? That's your real question. Right. And the answer is you have to have checklists in order. You may not actually have an answer. And there may be very, very dark times in terms of having no response or you feeling like this isn't it. I don't think there's a shortcut here, right? That's what I'm trying to articulate is there's no shortcut. I think the process of going through this, I call it crossing the chasm. You're on one side of the river and you need to get to the other side of the river. But in between is this river the flow is very uncertain. Sometimes it's very calm. It seems very easy and shallow. Other times it's like raging and you don't know what the hell's going to happen if you step foot in this river. Yeah. And so the only way to do it is by testing the water. And you have to go in and out. You have to feel what it feels like. So you can't get paralysis by analysis. That's a really, really important aspect is at some point you just have to go out there and start pushing this narrative. And then you're going to have to go out there and especially for someone like yourself who's writing something, right? Is this going to resonate with people? Because that is your gauge and your compass. And so just because it's important to you, and by the way, sometimes we write things that we should because they're important to us and we should release them because they're important to us, regardless of anybody else's feedback. But then there's times where we have to do something opposite and we have to figure out, well, how do I, you're not changing everything. You're just navigating it in a different way that people are giving you these insights. And then you're taking those insights, deconstructing them and then implementing them into the writing.
So where's this book? Are you going to go back into it?
I've started to go back into it.
Oh, yay. So, when did you start? When did you go back to it?
Last week, actually.
Oh, my God. Oh, that's so exciting.
And so I've done something different this time. I don't know. I'm not naturally a great writer, but I really love to speak. So what we've been doing lately is having these sessions where essentially I have a friend just ask me questions about the book and I just answer and I just go on these riffs for 10, 20, 30 minutes at a time. And then in that is these nuggets of inspiration that I've found because I was able to verbally articulate it in a way that versus when I would sit down in front of my computer and type, it was almost like I was talking in a different person's language. It wasn't coming naturally as a part of the flow state. Like we're having a conversation right now and I'm naturally talking. I'm not thinking about anything. These are just words that are kind of just moving in my brain as I think like 15 seconds ahead. But when I would sit down and write, it was so intentional and so planned and organized. It didn't feel like it was I was present in the moment. It was like, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I got to write about chapter 4 now. Okay, let me get in the mindset of chapter 4. And what I felt is that's not the best way that I personally operate.
Well, you sound like a very analytical, logical, kind of reasonable person. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to. if you talk to my fiance, she'd be like, I don't think so.
What's the emotional side like? What is that? Is that hard for you? Is managing your emotions, has that been difficult for you, or is that something that's always just kind of been in check and you've been able to operate more from a logical place? Does the emotional side go in the driver's seat sometime? How does that work?
No, I would say I naturally am very emotional. And to give an example, in the sport of racing, when an athlete pushes you or bumps you, that can either be by accident or on purpose to essentially, instigate a fight. Right. And they know that if they can burn out some energy from you fighting with 5 laps to go, that with 2 laps to go, you have less energy. So it's almost like this, this instigation that happens where they're kind of pushing you and pushing your buttons to have you expend additional energy. And for a few years of my career, I actually would fall for that. And then it was like, hey, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? This isn't important in the overall goal here. All the energy and time that I'm spending doing this, I could be reallocating towards just focusing on relaxing, being in the flow, racing my own race versus allowing me to race someone else's race. And so that metaphor was always a big driver in my life. And what I learned from short track was the greater that I could control what I said earlier, my essentially my response versus my reaction, the outcome was wildly different. So there's times when you react because that's a human, instinctive reaction, and I think it's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times where you do need to respond, and respond in a way that still drives the emotion and still shows the other party. Like if you're having a conflict, hey, I'm really unhappy about this, but you're able to articulate it in a way that are best suit what you're actually seeking. Because sometimes, because we're human, we react. And when we react, that reaction is not always best suited for the long-term vision of what we actually want to have happen. It's only, basically taking all of our energy and putting it towards that particular second. So it's much easier said than done, but I would be a big advocate of mindfulness and meditation to be able to train the mind and that mindset to be able to respond more consistently. And it doesn't happen overnight. These are things that happen over thousands of hours of repetitions. And just like your biceps or your legs or squats or whatever it is that you're training, it's not going to happen overnight. It takes reps. It takes recovery. It takes, trial and error. But over time, you will start to recognize this is the new normal for yourself. And that's when you know you're making real progress. And that's really cool to see.
Ooh, I relate to the new normal thing. Like that, I would say my biggest challenge of my adult life was sort of learning how to handle my emotions. I had a very complex relationship with my mom where it was all, I kind of like just lived for her. We were completely enmeshed. She died when I was 21. I didn't know what to do with myself. My emotions were out of control. I felt like I was experiencing them in a strange way for the first time, because before I just always wedged myself into what I thought she wanted my emotions to be. Suddenly I'm feeling these big waves that I don't know how to control. And it was about 3 years where I was really struggling, turned to alcohol, turned to eating disorders, anything to try and make it go away. And going to therapy, getting the help that I needed, and finally getting my emotions under control was what changed. Like it changed my entire life. I felt like once my new normal became, you can handle it. Like your emotions are no longer an issue. You know how to, in the sense that you know how to handle them. You know how to navigate them appropriately. That was, my God, what an amazing feeling when you start to realize that your new normal is a new normal, right? Isn't that like the greatest feeling?
It's powerful because you can see that you're making actual change.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I see it with friends in diet and lifestyle. I see it with friends in the way they operate and the way that they react to certain situations. And, I've had friends who in sports specifically, when they would lose, remember we were talking about this before, when they would lose, they would just go down this spiral. And it was almost like all I had to do was make them lose once in the beginning of the competition and the rest would take care of itself. They would just go down this downward spiral. And I could basically count them out. And then over time, after training that, they started to use that as a learning lesson and say, the first one did not go as I planned. What can I learn from that experience to reapply towards the next chance that I have? And it started to turn into a game for them where, hey, I didn't get what I wanted right away. And that's all right because I can't control every aspect, but I can control how I prepare and how I implement those lessons in the next time around. And that's where it starts to get really fun and interesting.
Was there ever, can you think of any loss that really rattled you in a way just different from any other loss where you just thought, I'm done, or were you spiraled?
So in my second Olympic Games, which was held in Torino, Italy, I was the 1500 meter men's gold medal reigning champion. And I had went into that race and I had not even made the final. And then in 1,000 meters in the men's, which I had been the silver medalist, I received a bronze. And 2 days before the final, I had a dream that strategically showed me what I should have done in order to win. So in my dream, I essentially won the race in the final. But the day of, I hesitated. I held back. I had this fear of going too early and showing my cards too early. And instead of winning, I got third. And while everyone around me was celebrating because I had medaled again at another Olympics, deep down, I was incredibly unsatisfied. And at the time, we had rented an apartment right across the street from the ice rink of where we were competing. And so I would wake up in the morning and I would see the ice rink, and it would just, I would replay that race hundreds, thousands of times in my head until my next final. And so I almost went down the downward spiral again, because I wasn't talking to anybody. I wasn't showing the weakness. I was only having these conversations internally. And while everyone else thought I was okay, I was deeply unhappy and unsettled about what just happened. And I felt that I had failed. I'd failed myself, and I'd failed everyone around me. And then finally, I snapped out of it. And I said, look, you're doing this because you love this sport. And while you can run the same race 4 times, you will get 4 different winners. And you made a mistake, and that's okay. You cannot change that. That you cannot change what has happened in the past. The only thing that you can do is keep showing up and keep getting up. And so for the final race, which was the men's 500 meters, I wasn't thinking about winning. I mean, obviously that was my goal. I wasn't thinking about the 1,000 meters. I wasn't thinking about the 1,500 meters. I wasn't thinking about anything else other than the process. What is the process that will give me the best possible chance at having success? Knowing there's no guarantee of having it, knowing that I potentially may not make the podium, but focusing on the process versus the prize was the single most greatest tool that I had. And then going into that final race of the men's 500 meters, I actually skated what I call the perfect race. I ended up winning gold.
Yay!
And yeah, but I wasn't because I was thinking about gold. It wasn't because I was thinking about what I was going to get, what kind of car I wanted to buy, what kind of things I wanted to do.
Right.
None of that shit matters. That stuff is all ancillary. Only thing that matters is right here, right now, and what can you do in the present moment to give yourself the best possible chance at having success. So instead of think about it as you've been given a gift, and now this gift is going to be reliant upon you. The only way that you open the gift is if you do everything in your power to be your best. That's it. That's it. Everything else will take care of itself. And the lessons of whether you win or you lose will be shown to you in another 5 years or in another 10 years. And then you'll be like, I can't believe I was so hard on myself. Like, I am a human being. And then also recognizing that the harder that you are on yourself, unless you're leaning on that to provide a constructive mechanism for growth, it's just hurting you and it's holding you back and it's taking longer. And so move from being in the passenger seat and go into the driver's seat, knowing that what's coming at you through the windshield is not within your control, but you have the steering wheel, and the way that you maneuver and respond to those things is within your hands. So that's really important to remember.
Oh, that's amazing. My boyfriend will hear that and love. He's always reminding me. He's a writer producer, and he's always telling me when I get caught up and anxious about, well, when's this going to happen? Or what about this? Or I want this thing to pan out. Or, when I'm just kind of airing my anxieties, he'll say, you focus on making good things, eyes on your own paper, and the rest will just happen. The only thing you need to focus on is what's right in front of you right now. Literally the page of the story problem that's in front of you, and then the next story problem, and then the next story problem, until before you know it, you've written a great screenplay, and then the next one, and the next one. And I mean, it's great advice. I will admit I might listen to it coming from you more than him. But so thank you for that.
Yeah, I think everyone needs reminders, and whoever is around you that you seem to resonate with, then keep that energy around you. You need that. Life is too short to have people around you who bring you down or don't make you feel the way that is going to make you feel good.
Isn't that the truth?
It's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Can we circle back to your book for a second? Your new book? Great. So it's about, this one's about your transition post competitive athlete.
Yeah. So this book is soft titled Hard Pivot. So if you imagine a speed skating race, when you see us flying around the corners, entering the corner in one direction and then doing a hard pivot on that right leg and then exiting, going the complete opposite direction, is more of like a metaphor for life. So, you have to go in one direction, all of a sudden with a snap of your fingers, that loss of identity, I call it the great divorce that occurs. So you've kind of built up your entire career around this one person, thing, item, personality. And then the snap of your fingers, you're no longer able to pursue that either by choice or by some unforeseen circumstance. And so you're going to have to adapt, reinvent, and then attack the world in a positive way that gives you, great outcome and growth. And so I believe that, the stories that I'll tell through my own personal experiences and psychological, I think, warfare that I've had with myself, and then what I've been able to do to overcome some of those things, hopefully will give people some insight and just some guidance in and around how they navigate their own personal struggles and the things that they are challenged. And I think that, look, COVID-19, what's happening around us in this world, tons of uncertainty and chaos it feels at times, and lots of things that we can't control. And maybe some people have lost their jobs, been furloughed, having been forced to do something else. I mean, you think about the entertainment industry as a whole, which has been essentially shut down since March. How do you figure out another path? How do you reinvent and readjust and recalibrate your focus and energy and recognize that you as a human have this incredible opportunity for growth? That's what this book is about, is finding those different avenues and facets of your personality to concentrate and shine upon, while also being very upfront and real and saying look, we're all human. We're going to have these moments of times when we feel less than, but we don't have to allow that to dictate the true trajectory of our lives. We can be back in the driver's seat. We can recreate that happiness and fulfillment. It's going to take work. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. And there's no hack. There's no TikTok. There are things that you are going to have to do that are uncomfortable, and they are going to be hard, and that is okay. And through that process of crossing that chasm is where you find real strength, real growth, and in my belief, real happiness.
Wow. What's your kind of story from when you were transitioning out of, is it post-Olympics immediately you knew, okay, I'm going to transition into business and starting, you have several companies, I believe?
So when I had retired, before I retired, I should say, I had already been kind of playing around and kind of angel, investing into these manufacturing companies in Utah, doing some real estate and some other things. But I didn't know what I was doing, Jennette. I just knew that I had to do something else besides speed skating and going in circles my whole life. So when I did retire, I made a promise to myself, because I had only been training a few skills which revolved around me being faster, better, bigger, stronger in the sport. Now I was in a world where going in circles is not the direction you want to go in. You want to make progress and growth.
So well said.
And so what I started to do was I said yes to everything. And I just experimented, and I went on this international adventure to just explore diversity and cultures and businesses and opportunities all over the planet. And I spent a lot of time in Asia. So did I have a plan? I knew that I was going to retire, and I knew that I had a deep resentment and fear of not finding a passion like I did for speed skating and for the Olympics. And 10 years, that was 10 years being retired. I can tell you, have I found something as passionate and as fun and as exciting as the Olympics? Besides life itself, not really. And I've had to come to terms. I've had to come to terms with that. Absolutely.
How do you come to terms with that? That's such a difficult thing. What is that process?
So I think you look at your life instead of one moment. Think about your life as a series of chapters. And someday someone's going to read this book and these series of chapters. And the chapters in my life were filled with just opportunities and experiences that I couldn't possibly articulate in my wildest dreams when I was younger. But they were merely still chapters in my life. And when we turn the page, and when chapter 5 or 6 or 10 is over and we go to chapter 11, that chapter is now blank. The beautiful thing is I have the pen in my hand, so I can write down what's happening in this next chapter. And that's what I've been doing for the past 10 years, is not only writing down and going through the experience. And obviously it doesn't go exactly, my screenplay for my life doesn't go exactly to what I had planned.
Right.
But it definitely gives me direction and guidance of how I would like it to go. And win, lose, or draw, and I've had many losses post-Olympics, it doesn't matter. I will always keep showing up. I will keep getting up, and I will keep trying, because I'm not afraid to fail. And I think many of us are kind of held again by that system that holds us back, because we're so scared to fail. We're so scared of what it might look like to someone else or feel like to ourselves. And at some point, you got to have the conversation. What would you actually do if no one gave a shit? Like, what would you actually do?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I sort of had the opposite point of view of how you mentioned not necessarily having found anything that gives you that same joy or spark or whatever you want to call it that the Olympics gave you. For me, it was like I acted when I was younger. My mom put me in it when I was 6. It was not my chosen anything. Did it for 20 years. Then all of a sudden, she dies and I'm like, okay, well, I'm now going to let go of that thing that mom forced me to do and figure out what I want to do. Oh, I think I want to write and direct. My fear is, what if, I I do not want to act again. I guess it's different with sport, and I'm assuming there's some kind of, is there an age limit with speed skating, or is that something that you can kind of go back to should you want to at any age?
It's a younger sport. It traditionally has been a younger sport. Yeah.
Gotcha. So with acting, it's like, well, fuck, I don't want to go back to acting. And if writing, directing doesn't pan out, does that mean I'm going to have to go back to acting? And, facing that, it's like, what if the thing I'm best at is the thing that I don't like? So it's really interesting. It's, you see what I'm saying, where it's sort of the opposite, where the thing that you enjoyed most was the thing that you did. Do you think that that's also the thing that you were best at? Or do you think that these other things that you're pursuing, do you feel like you're as good at them?
So I think that the attributes that made me a great athlete are the same attributes that will help me succeed in life.
Mm-hmm.
That's been pretty important. And, I look at it less as a career choice and more of an opportunity to see my growth and apply those and that mindset and those skills towards whatever I'm doing. So I love the fact that you found sparkle and fire. And by the way, so have I. I just think it still feels different, right? And it took me a long time, Jennette, to come to terms and say, you know what? If I never find it like this and it doesn't feel like that, that's because that was isolated to the Olympic space. So I'm comparing something that is very alien to the Olympic space. So in the Olympic space, I had this incredible experience, but I've had that incredible experience with my fiance, with my life in general.
Yeah.
So it's just different. And that's why I say the book that we're writing about all of ourselves is a book of chapters. And I think when we can recognize that, we should always look back on those chapters and laugh at ourselves and realize, I can't believe that I used to dress like that, or my hair was like that, or I made that decision. But it doesn't matter, because whatever happened in the past is just growth and opportunity and fuel for you in the future. And I firmly believe that, my purpose in life is to help people unlock that inner gold medal mindset that they have within themselves that maybe they've never even known that they've had. That's my kind of mission.
Was it really difficult to come to terms with, I might never find that thing again? Was it that loss of identity? How did you resolve that? Have you fully resolved it, or is it still something that's kind of an ongoing?
So I call it like a full circle. So, in 2007, I went on this wild show called Dancing with the Stars. And when I was on this show, we ended up winning this show. And so my identity went from Olympic athlete to there's that dancing guy who won Dancing with the Stars, literally overnight. And so some parts of the country, depending if I was traveling and I was going through TSA and security, they would essentially say hey, is that dancing guy? And I was like, oh yeah. Do you guys watch the Olympics? I'm competing again in another couple of years. You should watch it. I don't really watch the Olympics, but I loved you on Dancing with the Stars. And I was like, holy shit. I do live in a bubble. I thought everyone watched the Olympics. And I realized, nope, but everyone watches Dancing with the Stars. So it was that was an identity crisis, right? Because now I'm being told externally, hey, you're not an athlete. You're a dancing guy from a reality show.
Dear God.
Yeah. Yes. Dear God is right. And so, I don't know if you've ever seen the show. It's a very fun show, very hard. But then when I retired, I was so adamant about finding facets of my personality that were really good. So how do I go be the best at this? How do I go be the best at that? And the reality is the best is such an individual perception, right? There's no limit here. You're kind of breaking the glass ceiling. In sports, the best is you win gold. You're on top of the podium.
Yeah.
That's what the best is. In life, it's an ongoing process. And so that kind of reiterated this process over prize again, and coming to terms with, I may never find the opening ceremonies, the closing ceremonies, the camaraderie with my teammates at those competitions. That's okay. And so I've replaced them with areas and interests and curiosities of my life that help me want to grow in a certain perspective and also give back to community. And so the one thing that gives me the sparkle in my eye is engaging and communicating with other people who have struggled, people who have had addiction, people who have failed, people who feel like they're rock bottom, and then looking them in the eye and spending time with those people and helping them recognize that all is not lost And those mistakes that you've made cannot be changed. The only thing that you can do is do right by yourself, and you keep getting up every morning and you keep improving inch by inch. And that's what I love to do now. And so when I say that I can't feel that again, maybe that was speaking from a place of like, how do you walk into the opening ceremonies and like, thousands and millions and billions of people are watching this. No one's watching what I'm doing right now. And so that's okay too. But I think my importance that I've weighed on what I'm doing is, if not equally, if not more than what I was doing before in terms of my own personal view.
I just kind of love the feeling of nobody watching anything. I mean, I like absolutely love it. I think it feels like you got a secret that nobody else knows about. Do you get that at all? Like, ooh, I'm like cooking up some good stuff over here.
Yeah, of course. I used to do that in summer training. So we would do is like, basically, we call it just like head down and focused. So like no one hears from you for like 4 months, literally like you're just completely disappear.
Yeah.
And you reemerge from like the darkness, and you're like this, you've got this new idea, you've got this new thing, and it's very, very cool. So I can relate to that. I love that.
Have you ever thought about being a motivational speaker? Is that ever?
Yeah, I have. I've spoken a lot. And so we're actually in the process right now of actually creating a digital kind of gold medal mindset program for organizations to help people. So like when you think about this, when you join, for example, like corporate America, right?
Yeah.
You're given the onboarding systems and tools and resources to do your job the best you can. But no one at any point in life teaches you about the things that probably really matter. How you communicate with your employees, the teamwork associated, how do you deal with challenges and stress and personal stuff. Like 100%. Why do you keep failing at your January 1st resolution by January 18th? It's always out the window. Like, why do you do these things? And so I just firmly believe that how can I recreate a better holistic view of both yourself and your environment at home so that when you come back into the workspace, and whatever that means, you are more engaged, you have greater levels of empathy and gratitude, you're hungry to take on new challenges, you're willing to work with others, you're just happier. So that to me means that, you're going to do your best work. So
I would watch the shit out of that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be mindful of your time here, and I am so grateful that you took the time to do this. I have been so excited.
Jennette, you gotta come on mine. You gotta when you launch later this fall. I want to hear your whole story.
Yes. What are you recording your podcast now?
We've been recording. We haven't released it yet, but we're gonna probably launch this fall, late fall.
Oh, you're trying to backlog a bunch of them first?
Yeah.
That's so smart. I should have done that. We're really going hard here, me and Brian. If you don't mind, I just have one final question, and then we'll let you go.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think makes somebody a winner?
Oh. Consistency. I would say the consistency in your effort, in your intention, in your daily practice of gratitude and opportunity, your consistency in how you deal and how you create greater levels of resilience and grit. I think all those things are important.
Thank you. I just wrote them all down. Great. Okay, we're done.
Cool.
Yay.